sometimes. It makes me wonder how I keep from going under. It's like a jungle sometimes. It makes me wonder how I keep from going under.
Yo, what's good, everybody? Welcome to the second official episode of the Revolt podcast. It's the second episode. If you tuned into the first one, this is the first official episode where we go and really talk about some real issues, some real stuff, break down some philosophy. This episode is going to be about Pan-Africanism, really just the basics of Pan-Africanism, how it came about, its thought leaders throughout the years, and just the basics of the philosophy of Pan-African philosophy, Pan-African thought. And I'm gonna just try to break it down the best way I could. This is gonna be a two-part episode. I'm gonna break it down. I'm gonna break down the basics on this one, and then on the next episode, third episode, official Soul Revolt, I'm gonna talk about how Pan-Africanism has been perverted, how it's over the years, how it's become something where a lot of black African descendants, it's not something that we are gravitating towards anymore, because of the people that have taken it over. They known as hoteps, how they've taken it over, and just really caused a lot of division within our community and made people reject Pan-Africanism because of the things that they've been putting out. But for this episode, we just gonna stick to the basics to let you know what Pan-African is, how it started, where the ideas come from, and who they came from. So I'm gonna start off with the reasoning for why we even identify as Africans, why Pan-Africans identify as Africans, because I know a lot of people, black people in the United States, like to reject the fact that they are African, and they like to claim that they're American. And it's like, oh, I'm not African, I'm American. We try to disconnect themselves from the African continent, and just completely reject the notion that they are indeed African, and that is like not any type of connection between them and people that exist on the African continent. So I'm gonna start off there. So we know that slaves were kidnapped African people and they were brought here to the Americas. So that's like the basics of the understanding of why we call ourselves African, because enslaved black people, even back then, they called themselves African. They knew where they came from. They understood that they were a displaced people here in the United States, and they were a colonized people. So for them to end their resistance, they identified themselves as Africans, and they didn't take on the American identity because they knew that they weren't Americans. So, all right. So black people in America identifying as African, it goes back hundreds of years. I'm gonna start with the first black church, the African Episcopal Church of St. Thomas. It was founded in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania in 1792 by the Free African Society. These were people that was calling themselves Africans. And that project was led by Richard Allen. Shout out to the projects. You already know Richard Allen Project. Shout out to everybody down that joint. If you listening from down there, you's an African. You know what I mean? So yeah, so that's really like the basics of why we call ourselves Africans. Keeping up with the tradition of our ancestors, that's identifying with who we really are now, and going back to where we came from, because you don't know where you going unless you know where you been before. So yeah, that's where it started. And then, all right, so 1792, you got the first black African Episcopal Church at St. Thomas in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. So fast forward a couple hundred years to 1903, where you get the emergence of Marcus Garvey, and he's the one who actually introduced the concept of Pan-Africanism to unify people of the African diaspora. Marcus Garvey, he was like the man back then. He had the largest organization of black people in the UNIA, that stands for United Negro Improvement Association. Marcus Garvey was the man, and he brought Pan-Africanism to try to unify people, just based on the need to combat and reverse the effects of the transatlantic slave trade and colonial oppression. I mean, that was his whole thing. He was trying to start a Back to Africa movement. He was starting the Black Star Line, trying to get his boats up all that. He was doing everything. He was trying to make real moves. You mean, um, and ultimately he ended up getting deported from America. They kicked him out, said he can't come back no more. It was a whole crazy fiasco. All right, so around that same time, uh, that Marcus Garvey was coming up, you had W.E.B. Du Bois, and personally, I consider W.E.B. Du Bois the greatest scholar of African American history. Um, a lot of people regard him as that, like a lot of intellectual leaders and scholars of Black history and Black American history, at least they regard W.E.B. Du Bois as like the goat. Like he's the top dog. If you want to know something about Black people in America, you should read some of W.E.B. Du Bois's works, but not just his early work, as even later, because later into his life, he really got on the Pan African wave. But he was already on it. Like him and Marcus Garvey was coming up around the same time during 1903. So, but the thing is, a lot of people call W.E.B. Du Bois a traitor or a sellout because he was like really elitist. It's really based on his idea of the talented 10. For you saying like the 10% of the most talented Black people are going to be the ones that save society and nobody else. And it was just like people was kind of misconstruing it. But later in his life, he did ended up, uh, I'm gonna say, correcting himself and revising his statement. And because he made the original statement saying that the talented 10th would be the ones that come up and save Black people through education and all that kind of stuff. But then he realized that if they don't have the philosophical principles, if they not standing on the principles that are conducive with anti-colonialism and that fall in line with Pan-Africanism, that he knew that the talented 10th they wouldn't be worth anything. They would be just as bad as white people colonizing us. And that's where you get the concept of neo-colonialism. So, yeah, W.E.B. Du Bois, him and Marcus Garvey. All right, so they had a beef. Yeah, so a lot of people call W.E.B. Du Bois a traitor and a sellout because him and Marcus Garvey had like a little beef, but it was really like a petty beef. It wasn't even nothing too crazy. It really started because Marcus Garvey was trying to get some of his people to go to this conference, this Pan African conference that W.E.B. Du Bois was a part of. This Pan Africans. Pan Africanism been around for it been was around since back early 20th century. So I think this is probably the second Congress maybe that they was organizing somewhere in Europe. I forget what country, but Marcus Garvey was trying to send his people over there, but he ended up being too late trying to get the visas and stuff for his people to travel abroad, and he blamed W.E.B. Du Bois for that. And in some of W.E.B. Du Bois's publications, he was critiquing Marcus Garvey's program, and specifically like his Black Star line, because he just felt like Marcus Garvey was kind of like exaggerating what he was doing a little bit, just a little bit though. Like, but he never really talked down about Marcus Garvey. He never really badmouthed. He was with the Pan African movement. Like he spoke of him in a good light, but it was just his program that he had a critique of, and people called him a sellout because of that. It was really a petty beef. But when you think about it, these two people were two sides of the same coin. See, Marcus Garvey, he was like a great mobilizer. He knew how to rile people up. He knew how to get people moving, get you activated, get you ready for whatever. Marcus Garvey had you ready to lay your life down for the struggle at the very moment, at the snap of a finger. But what Du Bois was he was just a great scholar and he was an educator. But the thing where I see where they should have came together, you need both of those things. If you're gonna be a Pan-Africanist, if you trying to really make change out here, you gotta be able to mobilize people and organize people the way Marcus Garvey was, but you also gotta be able to teach people the way that W.E.B. Du Bois could, and you gotta be able to analyze situations the way W.E.B. Du Bois could. So yeah, they were both two sides of the same coin. They were fighting for the same thing. They were just on two different playing fields of it. I mean, I just feel like that was just the ultimate petty beef. And I feel like, man, if they would have never had been beefing, or if they would have had not exiled Marcus Garvey out of the United States, and they ended up working together somehow, and forged a tighter relationship. Oh man, I can only imagine what would have happened, how it would have been, how history would have played out. But it didn't play out like that, and here we are now. So yeah, Marcus Garvey, great man, the largest organization ever. Like, you can't top that. And it's 2017, we still ain't even had no organization like that. And that's really one of my main things. It's like, how do you? I want to figure out, how do we create an organization or a mass movement that's conducive with the Pan-African tradition, the anti-colonialism, anti-capitalism, an organization that's going to teach people the correct methods, the correct philosophy, and the principles to stand on. Like, that's, you can't, like, once you do that, it's like, it's too solid. You can't break that apart. But that was really the thing. See, Marcus Garvey, he had the mobilization, he had the troops, he had the army, but he didn't really have the education behind it to teach people to keep it pushing forward. And W.E.B. Du Bois, he had all the information, he had all the knowledge, but he didn't have the ability to mobilize people, to rile people up, get them angry, get everybody like, like, let's do it right now, like on that type time. I mean, like, we about to join, we gonna follow you wherever you go, like on, like how Marcus Garvey had people following him. So yeah, all right. So that was the early 1900s. So we're gonna fast forward to 1957. Kwame Nkrumah, he was a student at Lincoln University. He spent a lot of time in Philadelphia studying. He graduated from Lincoln. He went back to Ghana in the 1940s or 50s, I think. He attended one of the Pan-African Congresses. I think it was about probably the fifth Pan-African Congress. And the fifth Pan-African Congress was probably the most significant, because that's where they came up with an actual agenda for African countries to decolonize their countries and take back what was theirs, and get the Europeans out of their countries and take back their political rule, their political power. So Kwame Nkrumah was the president of Ghana. He assumed the presidency in 1957. Ghana was the first African country to receive independence from colonialism. And once they received independence, he went on to help other countries gain independence. And he's regarded as the father of Pan-Africanism, especially on the African continent, like, because he was the first to ever do it. He was the first. That was the first country to receive their independence. And once he did it, he knew that it would, just because they got independence, he needed to help everybody else. He needed to unify the rest of Africa. And Pan-Africanism, when you think about it, because, all right, so after the Berlin Conference and all those European countries got together and decided that they was going to take a part of Africa, all the little parts that they wanted for themselves. Once they did that, like, just that in itself, and they created all the lines and borders, like all those countries in Africa was all created by Europeans. All those lines and borders that you see on the map, that's all created by Europeans. African people never did that. That's a European creation right there. So with Pan-Africanism, is saying we need to reunify all these countries back to the original way that they was, because we never did that. Why are we divided like this? We need to unify, come back together, and work together to just end colonialism and oppression for everybody, because who gave them the right to do that in the first place? So I'm gonna just give you a couple quotes from Kwame Nkrumah real quick. Some really good ones, I feel like. So he said, "It is only the ending of capitalism, colonialism, imperialism, and neocolonialism, and the attainment of world communism that can provide the conditions under which the race question can finally be abolished and eliminated." See, he was talking about communism. He was talking about ending capitalism to end racism. Like, Those two things, you can't separate those two things. A lot of people try to separate race and class, but you can't do it because capitalism perpetuates racism, and you could end capitalism and still have racism, but you can't end racism without ending capitalism. That, that's a important thing to know because when you think about capitalism, it profits off of racism. Like racism is basically the economic system. It tells you who to exploit and who to give resources to. That's what racism does. That's the material effects. We talking about dialectical materialism and things like that. That's one of the basic philosophies of Karl Marx. If you don't read Karl Marx, you should definitely read some Karl Marx. And Kwame Nkrumah studied Karl Marx. He read a lot of Karl Marx, and he read a lot of Marcus Garvey, and that's where he developed his ideas from. So, I mean, he put all the stuff that he was doing together, and then he ended up being titled as the father of Pan-Africanism. So, all right, another quote from Kwame Nkrumah. All people of African descent, whether they live in North or South America, the Caribbean, or any part of the world, are Africans and belong to the African nation. And another quote. The total liberation and unification of Africa under an all-African socialist government must be the primary objective of all black revolutionaries throughout the world. It is an objective which, when achieved, will bring about the fulfillment of the aspirations of Africa and African descendant people everywhere. It will, at the same time, advance the triumph of the international socialist revolution and the onward progress towards world communism, under which every society is ordered on the principle of from each according to his ability, to each according to his needs. So we talking about communism and socialism. These two principles, communism and socialism, these ideas are so ingrained into Pan-Africanism. You can't be a Pan-Africanist if you're not a communist or a socialist. You can't. You just can't. If you don't talk about Pan-African, if you're going to talk about being a Pan-African, then you gotta be talking about anti-capitalism. You gotta be talking about communism and socialism. You gotta be talking about the redistribution of wealth. These are the tenets of Pan-African philosophy. It's just the basics of it. I mean, like you can't. It's all in there together. So we black. We try to end racism. We gotta end capitalism too. It's all the same. It's all in cahoots and together. It's the overlap. It all overlaps and oppresses us. So we gotta fight all of that. So yeah. And with communism and socialism, as far as like these philosophies, because they are like the basic tenets of Pan-Africanism, a part of it. I feel like I need to talk about them a little bit. So communism and socialism is basically just having balance and not doing things in excess, because with the capitalist system, we do everything in excess. People are being overworked, goods are being overproduced, and things are being wasted. Why is there so much waste? Why, when you go to the market and the food is not being bought, that it just gets thrown away when there's millions of homeless people that need that food and they can eat that to live and survive? And there's people all over the world that can use that food. But here in America, because we live in such a terrible system of capitalism, we waste so much. Like everything just gets wasted, it just gets thrown out. Like I don't know if you ever worked at a fast food restaurant, but I know when I used to work at McDonald's, at the end of the day, we used to have to do the waste count or whatever. And man, by the end of the day, just one day working at McDonald's, you had so much waste to throw out. You just be like, why are we throwing this out anyway? It just, because it ain't even like the food bad. It's just, it probably was sitting too long. Ain't nobody come by no burgers, little McChicken joint or double cheese joint in a little minute. So them joints probably sat there for like 2 hours, and now you just gotta throw it out. But it's mad homeless people outside the McDonald's. Like, why can't you just get that joint to it? I mean, like, don't be making sense, man. So yeah, capitalism. I mean, people overwork, goods overproduced, and the thing about it, when you talk about capitalism, you gotta ask yourself: are we naturally an evil and exploitative species, or are we social beings that naturally find ourselves grouped together to form communities? When you talk about communism, you talking about community. You living in communities. Each one teach one. I do this. You do this for me. Like it's community communism. That who don't want to live in like that? Like that don't even make sense. From each according to his ability, to each according to his need. Don't forget that quote. That part right there. That's basic communism right there. So yeah, with Pan Africanism, just trying to get you to look to Africa, see Africa as the source of where we come from, and just really a lot of the wealth that's generated throughout the world. Like all them countries, um, during the Berlin Conference when they decided that they was going to partition Africa and take whatever part they wanted. Yeah, sure, all the African countries got their independence, but then they institute neo-colonialism. Really should read Kwame Nkrumah's work because he did a lot of writing on neo-colonialism. He that's why he was regarded as the father of Pan-Africanism, because he seen everything that they was trying to do and he broke it down, and it's too solid. You can't go against it. You know, once you read his stuff, man, get his books, buy his books, man. He wrote plenty of books. You gotta read them, man. I did a lot of studying on Kwame Nkrumah when I was in college, so that's just really how I know. And just doing my studies on him, I got invited to a Kwame Nkrumah International Conference at Lincoln University. It was a whole bunch of people, like people from the African continent, from Europe, from London, uh, all kinds of people from everywhere, from the Caribbean, everywhere, man. I'm just like, man, like, there's people from everywhere, like scholars, people that really be on their Pan-African flow. And I'm just like, wow, this is wild. Like, man, how did I get hit? How did I end up getting here? Just because I opened up a book and I decided to look at what Kwame Nkrumah was talking about. And I read it and I took it in. And, yeah, you can't, it's just too solid. You can't go against the stuff that he was talking about. So, yeah. So yeah, all right. So then you got So Kwame Nkrumah, he ended up being exiled out of Ghana. It was like a coup d'état backed by I think it was by Great Britain. They paid for some people inside of the country, some rebels, to take over the country. He wasn't even in the country. He had went on like a trip somewhere, but it was like, yo, you can't come back. Like if you try to go back, they gonna off you. So he ended up going to Guinea, where Sekou Touré was. That's one of the first countries he helped get independence. It's a song that they used to play back then when they first got their independence. Ghana, Guinea, Mali, you go like that, and it was just like that was like one of their songs, like let you know Pan Africanism is coming. Ghana, Guinea, Mali, like these three countries we leading the way right now. So, yeah, but a lot of African American leaders went to go meet with Kwame Nkrumah. There's pictures of him with Martin Luther King Jr., Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. There's a picture of him with Muhammad Ali, Malcolm X, Kwame Ture. He went to go live there, and he was formerly known as Stokely Carmichael. He ended up changing his name after Kwame Nkrumah and Sekou Touré. That's how he got Kwame Ture. So yeah, man, don't ever sleep on the Pan-Africanism, man, because it's real and it's here. It ain't going nowhere because it's too solid. You can't go against it. Once you find it for yourself, then you gonna know, like, this is what it is. This is what I need to get behind. But the thing is that, yeah, people, they done hijacked it and they done misinterpreted it. They trying to divide and exclude people. It's all crazy. But before I close out this episode, I'm gonna just leave y'all with another quote from Kwame Ture. It was he was doing a speech at Cheney University in the early '90s, a couple years before he ended up passing away. I think he ended up going back to Ghana and passing away. He died or Guinea, yeah, one of them, somewhere, one of those two countries, because he was over there spending a lot of time over there. Before he passed away, he ended up going back. He lived there, and then he ended up coming back to the United States to do some more work. some revolutionary work, try to get the message behind people, let people know that Pan-Africanism was the way to go. He was one of the major proponents of it once Kwame Nkrumah had passed away. It was Kwame Ture. He kind of just took the torch and just carried that flame on up until he passed away. Um, so yeah, I'm gonna just leave y'all with some quotes. It's a quote by Kwame Ture just talking about how people don't really look to how people don't look to Africa in the United States. How African Americans don't look to Africa, even though it say African American is like you gotta go with what's first. African, then all right. So yeah, um, so this is a quote from Kwame Ture. He was talking about how people like to say, yeah, oh, they don't like you in Africa, they don't accept us there, they don't whatever, all that kind of crazy job. So he said, it may be true that they will not accept you in Africa, but we know where you're not accepted. So go where you have a better chance of permanent success. You mean where you like you could get success here, but you know you gotta deal with a whole bunch of stuff. You mean so go where you think you're gonna have the best chance of permanent success. He also said that once you learn the language in Africa, you could probably pass. I mean, you could never pass in the United States. You can't pass in the United States. You's a nigga wherever your ass go. If you go to Africa, you learn the language. Hey, who gonna know the difference? Other than maybe if you got your accent, the way you might pronounce certain words, but you'll be alright. I mean, he said we came here as slaves. I mean, you can make it anywhere. I mean, we came here as slaves. We came here in chains with nothing. We ain't have nothing. We separated our families. Just total division, separated from our name. They took our names. They took everything, man. So we came here like that and survived and made it. You can go anywhere and fucking make it. I mean, it's 2017. Stop fucking playing, man. You don't gotta sit around in the United States. If you wanna leave, then leave. I mean, this shit is trash anyway. Don't try to hold on to this bullshit ass country just because you feel like you got some kind of ties to it. Like, nah, man, we a global people. I mean, that's the thing about humanity. We gotta stop living within these borders, these fake borders that these Europeans that created. Because before they did that, people was traveling freely wherever they wanted to go. It wasn't you ain't had to spend no money to travel. It was just if you got a boat and you hop on that bitch. Shit, we out. Pack up some food, we out. You mean they been had boats. If you look at ancient Egyptians, they been had hieroglyphics of them having boats and having travels. There's stories about Native Americans in the United States having contact with ancient Egyptians, and they ended up saying that they had brought them over a whole bunch of different kind of foods and stuff, and brought them out of like a real bad crisis that they was going through. So man, people been was traveling. You ain't gotta stay where you at. I mean, you can migrate. People migrate, man. You ain't gotta stay in one country your whole life. I mean, move out, see some stuff. Shoot. Shit, I know I ain't never been outside the United States, but the first chance I get, I don't know if I'm coming back. I'm trying to get about this joint, man. Listen, this shit is trash, bro. So, yeah, and I feel like I'd much rather go to an African country that's messed up. I mean, at least then I feel like I could deal with being poor, but I can't deal with being discriminated against because of the color of my skin. Like, I mean, I don't know. That's just me though. It ain't for everybody. I mean, I don't know. Well, so I'm gonna just end this podcast off. With the song. It's a song by my homie Gully Ganja. It's my homie 100,000 grand. I mean, fuck with him heavy. Gully Ganja, Gully, Ganja, Ganga. You already know LTMS shit. Let's talk and more smoke and learning through my struggle. You know what I mean, leaping on the most sensitive type shit. You know, yeah, it's my homie. It's a song called ERY, produced by Hunnit Gill. You already know Chinese finest. You mean, shout out my nigga Mark. You mean, you rich gang. You mean. He gonna be mad as shit, but yo, Yeah, that's the homie though, man. Shout out to them niggas out Delaware. They be doing their thing, you mean, on the music tip. But yeah, it's my homie Gully, ERY, produced by Hunnit Gill. Tune in.
Stars in the stripes, spangled banner cameras in the lights, stars out the night, red carpet life, standing on them couches, blowing clouds that bounces, spilling champagne on my trousers. It's a party all around us.
Music gets into my party hard. Now I'm just ready to go, right before the party start. Girl, I'm not gonna break your party hard. Girl, I'm just letting you know, because we about to party hard. I hope you ready to go.
Me and LeBron got the same whips. Me and Dwayne on the same strip. Me and Wiz burn the same piff. Me and Stally need the same pick. Me and Meek bone the same chicks. Me and Wale rock the same kick.
My counterparts always got my best interest. It come to dumb on my money, I get defensive. Me and the Trey Pound, plied my closest friendship. Smarting up on them with taking sucker shit offensive. Carry yourself, I get an honorable mention. Be the boss, not the apprentice. You can't take what's given, so make options. Get smart with the money, so put some stocks in. Sometimes you just close to the shoulder like Wisconsin. The morals intervening with my conscience. What if we ran through them O's like Sonic? The hedgehog, will I be better off? Don't make our list short, we couldn't sell it all. The crumbs we would no longer settle for. Don't intervene when it's convenient, get no medal for it. So you gotta get the medal to protect the fortress. Get connected, just like when we gon' use our sources. See something before it blow, man, the struggle gorgeous. Like all that hard work that goes behind your portrait. Apply pressure, force it, don't fuck up my forces. Million people with a similar story. Lost a parent, but it's apparent there's something there for me. Use that motivation accordingly. Cause deep inside, man, that shit could've tortured me. I've been back on my feet. Whatever happens was designed to happen to me. So time, make my best of it. Problems want less of them. Backwood full, well, I know another check coming. And you can't avoid it. In the battle, you need protection, be well supported. Man, your work ethic don't match, I got nothing for you. Keep running your mouth and spilling the beans like Goya. I need a stress relief, pussy, weed, and water. Each day is like my patience getting shorter. I ain't with the back and forth, you can save it for my lawyer. Reality, no bench, you gotta play off 4 quarters. At point where shit get most confusing. The weed, tend to coach me through it. Fake niggas get crossed over, have them looking stupid. I don't OD niggas shit, who got these niggas boosted? Dog, want you in the game, man, it's how you play. No strategy, getting it, then you in the way. Like a commercial break. Dog, blame it on yourself if they heard it late. It's all how you move through it, we all deserve our place. I'm gonna overload the grind like a circuit break. Waiting for a handout, you don't deserve a taste. Like the difference between a dinner and a plastic plate. One can hold the weight, the other gon' crack and break. Man, the world gon' live long, I'ma plead my case. I'ma put on in the world, gon' see my face. Man, I pay for the frame as I say my grace, yeah. Man, Gully kept it real out of all things. Tryna put money away for my offspring. You should never fall out over small things. Man, I love all my niggas, we a small team.